Have you ever wondered what helps us heal? Think of the time that you were bedridden with the flu. It probably happened during the time that you knew you absolutely could not get sick because you had way too much going on, and there you were. What did you do? Maybe some of you chose to go to the doctor and get a prescription so that you could make it through your week. And others of you might have chosen to go with a natural remedy like an herb or something like that. And still others of you might have chosen not to do any of those things, but just simply lay in bed and rest, change your diet, and just wait for the flu to run its course. But how is it that we can engage in such a wide variety of approaches to the same type of illness, like a virus, and yet we tend to get better? I have been fascinated with understanding what healing is since I can remember. Probably because growing up in an East Indian household, my family practiced the mind-body principles of Jainism. Now, Jainism is an ancient Indian philosophy that's thousands of years old. And similar to Buddhists, Jains believe that we as individuals hold the key to understanding and regulating our own health by paying close attention to our mental and emotional states. So as a child, I read voraciously. I loved to read, and I would read these books that were written by the Jain monks, and they would go into excruciating detail about what they had learned from their own first-person experience. They would talk about the states of consciousness that were part of the human experience, and the connections of the states of consciousness with our mental and emotional states. And they talked very specifically about something that they called prana, a vital force, life force, superhighway that connected the mind and the emotions and the body to guide our own health. So as a child, I found this information totally fascinating, but as the daughter of a scientist, I was also kind of skeptical of it too. It wasn't really, though, until I went to college that I realized these Eastern perspectives on healing in the mind were far from the norm. Try talking about prana to your Columbia neuroscience professors. And actually, my professors then at the time, in the early 90s, were teaching us, based on the data that was available at the time, that there was no plasticity in the brain, meaning that no neural connections were formed in the brain after age 7. So, of course, now we know that's not true, but I remember at the time thinking, really? How could we be so sure? You see, I had gone to college to try to understand the connections between neuroscience and healing, but instead I just found myself more confused, just like I did when I was a child. And what I came to realize is that we had these very distinct camps of thought around how neuroscience and the mind worked. And as I continued my studies, what I realized is that those camps of thought were very much guiding the way that we do medicine today. We have essentially two different camps of medicine today. The first camp is kind of led by the scientific idea that our thoughts and our emotions are essentially byproducts of our biochemistry, and that healing occurs when we give an agent like a drug that alters that biochemistry. This type of model is sometimes called the medical model, and it's rooted in an idea called pathogenesis. That is, that healing is the absence of disease. So the story goes kind of like this. We're basically healthy until we're invaded by some kind of bacteria or a virus, or worse yet, a bullet wound. And the job of the doctor is then to understand what that disease is and get it out. Once we get rid of the disease, we're healed. And this type of medicine has been enormously helpful, especially in emergency situations. Then you have the other camp of medicine in the West, which is called complementary or alternative medicine. So as I dug deeper, what I realized is that what is being called complementary medicine here in the West actually stems from systems of medicine that are thousands and thousands of years old and that have been practiced for thousands of years in many different countries. So these are medicines like Tibetan medicine, Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, for example. And the thread that ties all of these different forms of complementary medicine together were the same things that I had read about as a child, this idea of vital energy being a guiding force in understanding our health, and that the mind-body connection was crucial to guiding our health. So this type of model is based on something called salutogenesis, which suggests that healing is not just the absence of disease, but rather it reflects the harmony of our mind, our emotions, our body, and our environment. And the goal of the practitioner then is actually to look at this as an interconnected system, assess the balance or imbalance, and then based on that, recommend treatments like diet, exercise, herbs, yoga, acupuncture that help the mind and body to heal itself. Now, historically, complementary medicine has been viewed with a lot of skepticism in the West. And skeptics of complementary medicine point to things that are really particularly difficult to understand, like acupuncture or energy healing. And they'll say, well, these are just placebo effects. So we know that placebo effects occur when we think we're getting a treatment that's helpful, but we're not really given that treatment, and still we get better. Placebo is actually made up of a lot of different things. It's made up of expectation, conditioning, and meaning and context, meaning things like how connected we feel with our doctor. So in terms of placebo and complementary medicine, we know, for example, that effects of acupuncture and pain are at least in some part due to placebo effects. But what's interesting is that placebo doesn't seem to just apply to complementary medicine. It also applies to modern medicine as well. So, for example, researchers at Harvard did a study where they compiled the data of 38 randomized placebo-controlled trials in depression. And they were interested in understanding what the effects were of antidepressants on depression. What they found across the board of all of these studies is that 25% of the effect of the reduction in depression for mild and moderate depression was due to the drug. And 75% of the effects were due to placebo. So that meant that if you were suffering from mild or moderate depression and you were given an antidepressant, you would see a reduction in symptoms. But 25% of that seemed to be due to the actual biochemical aspect of the drug, and 75% due to things like your own mental state, your expectation of whether you were going to get better, your relationship with the doctor. But what's also interesting is that placebo effects don't seem to just hold for pills. They also seem to have an effect in surgery. So researchers around the world now have looked at the effects of sham or placebo surgery in patients with osteoarthritis, torn meniscus in the knee, and even broken backs. And what they found in all of these studies is that for patients that are given placebo surgery, meaning that they're given anesthesia, they're given an incision, but they're told that they're getting a surgery and they're actually not given the actual surgery, those patients show as much reduction in pain and improvements in function as those who got the actual surgery. It's mind-blowing, right? So if placebo effects occur from everything from acupuncture to surgery, then who's right about how healing works? Is it the biochemical molecular model camp, or is it the complementary medicine camp? Who's right? The problem here is the question. It really reflects our human tendencies to see things in either or, in categories, it's this or that. We adopt one way of thinking and we believe that's the right approach. Somewhere in the middle actually lies the truth. That is actually, though, the beauty of placebo, because what it's teaching us is that it doesn't negate all of the effects of medicine, whether it's modern medicine or complementary medicine. So we sometimes think of placebo as we've been cheated. It's like a zero-sum game, we're losers. But in fact, it's absolutely the opposite. What placebo is teaching us is it's not an or, it's an and. It's teaching us that what the ancients said thousands of years ago, our abilities to generate and influence our own healing are tremendous. If we could just build a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science, we stand a chance to create a global model of healing that's far more complete and effective than anything we've ever done. And this bridging is already starting to happen. So for example, researchers in the Netherlands are pairing Chinese medicine diagnoses with systems biology. And in bridging those worlds, what they've come to realize is that they can better predict what types of treatments are going to be effective for different kinds of patients with rheumatoid arthritis, for example. This kind of discovery was only possible because we chose to bridge those languages, we chose to bridge those worlds, and it could mean a world of difference for those patients. Is there something like a vital energy that connects our minds, our bodies, our spirits, our environment together that guides our health? Well, researchers from around the world, including research that I've done, suggest it's a real possibility that we ought to be scientifically looking into. But the question is, will we have the freedom and the courage to explore the more difficult scientific questions, even when they don't seem to fit in with the currently reigning scientific paradigm? For me, the tipping point is clear. It's when we choose to let go of thinking that our one way, our one view is correct. In this case, in medicine, that drugs and surgery are the only answer. And when we choose to incorporate different models of thinking, different languages into our existing frameworks, we stand a chance to understand what healing truly is. That information is not only crucial to scientific success, it is crucial to our health. Thank you.